is just to have that awareness of how fleeting and precious our lives are. Because you can't sit there for 3 hours doom scrolling if you have this awareness of how precious this very moment is. It makes you live with a consideration towards what's important and what you can really, what's really not worth our angst or our time. And so you can get really clear about that. And in so doing that, you just build a life that is so much richer than if you just act as if this thing goes on forever. I'm going to go home at 4 and have my food, and I'm going to go sit in front of the TV, and I'm going to wake up in the morning and do the thing. No, like, we're here with our own talents and things, gifts that we're supposed to be offering and sharing with the world. And it's running. The time is ticking, and that's a beautiful thing.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. Raw milk hurdles in Canada, the dangers of marijuana, a daughter's tragic suicide, an ornery milking cow. The conversation with our guest today covers so much territory, it's hard to encompass it in a few short phrases. But I tried. This is episode 547, and our guest today is Tara Couture. Tara is the author of Radiance of the Ordinary, and she is a retired nutritionist who has a 100-acre farmstead, Slowdown Farmstead, where she lives with her husband, Troy. There they grow, raise, and preserve all of their own food. Tara today discusses her own personal challenges on the homestead, and she reminds us why life is still so very beautiful. Before we get into the conversation, which, by the way, I can't wait for you to dive into, I want to invite you to the Wise Traditions Conference. This is the conference that nourishes in every way. It's just a couple of weeks away. We'll be in Salt Lake City, Utah, October 17th to the 19th. Sally Fallon Morell will be there, of course, along with Doctors Mark and Samantha Bailey, the Beagleson brothers, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Dr. Tom Cowan, and so many other amazing experts. The food is always Wise Traditions friendly. The people are too. We can't wait to see you there. So go to wisetraditions.org to sign up now. It's not too late. And enjoy the conference that nourishes in every way. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Tara.
Oh, thank you, Hilda. Wonderful to be here.
The minute we heard your book was out, we're like, we have to have Tara on again. So we spoke years ago when you were just telling us a little bit about your Slowdown Farmstead, and now so much has happened. So we want to catch up with you. I want to start with an insight from your book, Tara, about a moment when you were kind of digging in the dirt. I think you and your husband were weeding or something, and you suddenly realized that things were shifting. Talk to us about that moment.
Yeah, that was at our first farm, and we were selling grass-fed beef, heritage pork. We were doing all the things and raising 3 small children. And we had just got to a point where we were, up till 11 or 12 every night. And he worked off farm, and everything was just consumed, including ourselves. We were just so absolutely consumed by the tasks of our lives. And I remember weeding in the garden and looking up across the rows to him and just asking him if we were going to be okay, because we were both pretty miserable. And he, for the first time in our marriage, said, I don't know. And it just struck me, because I was so used to him saying, of course we're going to be okay. We can do anything together. And that really hit me. And just immediately in that moment, we were like, this isn't going to happen. Our marriage isn't up for grabs. And so at that point, we made some really profound decisions in our life.
Can you tell us a little bit more about those decisions? Because today, Tara, I suspect we're going to talk about relationships with the people around us, but also nature and our immediate community and all the broader world. So talk to us about what gave you the tenacity and the vision to think this is something we want to hold on to.
Well, my marriage is the most important thing in my life. And we had early on in our farming adventures done a holistic management course. And so one of the gifts of that was prioritizing what it was in our lives that was most important. And for us, that was our marriage and our children. And so if you're very clear about those things, it helps you to weather those storms that come and make really hard decisions about what you're going to do in your life to prioritize and protect those things. And so because we had that clarity, we made, I don't want to make it sound easy. It was really hard, but we did make the decision to sell that farm, to stop selling farm goods to other people, and to downsize and move to a smaller farm and just raise our food for ourselves while still being involved in the local farming community. For us, with him having to have an off-farm job, we needed to be able to have time with our kids and for ourselves, and to bring pleasure back into our lives, because we were really just in sort of a nose to the grindstone type of work ethic, getting things done. And so for us, we had to make that decision, which was really hard, to move a whole farm to another farm, animals, equipment. It's a monumental task, but one that I'm incredibly grateful we decided to do, because it changed our whole lives after that.
What you're describing, I think, must resonate with a lot of listeners, because I remember those days when my kids were little and it was, changing another diaper and getting another snack, and just it was so busy, and it can become almost a sterile exchange with your partner, with your life partner, a business relationship where you're like, okay, you're picking up the kids after soccer, I'm going to go to the PTA meeting, and the next thing you know, you're like these two ships passing in the night, you're not connecting anymore. So you made that breathing room, although, because I read your book, I know how busy it is even just to make food for your family. So what else did you do, Tara, to nurture that relationship with him?
Well, we just started building moments of pleasure in together, of connection, and letting go of things that didn't have to be. We were pretty ruthless with calling the things in our lives that were, just maybe the extras, and that we could make room for other things. And that's really simple, like in the day-to-day type thing, like when our kids are grown and they've left. But when we were in that, and when they were younger, and we had sports and I was homeschooling. And so there was lots of stuff always demanding our time, but we could always, squirrel away 20 minutes or a half an hour to just sit together at sunset, on a hay wagon and have a conversation. Or, we to this day fill our cow trough with water, and in the summer it's cool, and in the winter there's a wood fire that keeps it warm, and we sit out there at night and talk. I mean, there's just, whatever someone finds pleasurable. I think that's really important, especially when you work hard. We need that dichotomy in our life. The hard work just earns us the pleasure, and the pleasure is so much sweeter because we've worked hard for it. And I think those things are really important. And I think also just having the awareness and having stated out loud that our marriage is the most important thing. Well, those are beautiful words, but unless they're enforced with real tangible action, they're pretty meaningless. And so those little actions, it can just be little tiny things throughout the day, are so important.
Well, talk to us about that same kind of commitment that you bring to the farm. Why is it so important to you, Tara, to have all those jars of ferments and to prepare things nose to tail so you're not wasting any of the animal, to do so much when you could maybe just go to, I don't know, a farm down the road, or perhaps a farmer's market to purchase some things?
Oh, that's such a big question, Hilda, because there's so much involved with it. And I'll try and pull those threads together as best I can. But living here on this little piece of land that we have, and raising animals from birth to death, including, butchering them ourselves. We do all on-farm slaughter here, is really important to me, because I feel it's a responsibility. It's, for the incredible gifts that we receive of being able to work on the land, of the beauty of the nature around us, and the connection that we have to our animals. There's also a responsibility in that. And I feel very strongly I have a very strong moral drive that for me, that includes making sure they have not only a beautiful life, but a beautiful death. And I take that very seriously. That was taught to me by my old country cowboy mentor many years ago. And he was very committed to that as well. And that was a gift he gave me. And I want to honor that gift. And I do that by making sure that what the bounty that we've been given is used with reverence and used wholly. That's the work part of my life. And I'm very devoted to that. And I also feel it's a deep connection to bigger things that are hard to access in today's world. You know, there's a lot of ease and comfort and convenience in the world. And I think the more that we can pull away from that, there's a lot of deeper meaning that can be excavated from just getting in and living in the tangible and working for these things that our ancestors would have known and recognized. There's something very deeply fulfilling about that for me.
Yeah, you said that in your book, and you said it a moment ago, that hard work makes the pleasurable moments even more pleasurable. Like, I think you described in your book, like that shower after you're bloodied and dirtied after helping to birth a calf, let's say, or whatever it is. You know, you're coming in, you're getting a shower and you're having a sweet moment at sunset, a little ice cream on the porch with your husband or what have you. Like, somehow it feels all the more amazing. Is that part of what you're referring to?
Absolutely. There's, you know, when it's just pleasures. And I think that's kind of a bill of sale that we're given right now. You know, this idea that we should be chasing all of this pleasurable, fun, happy, good vibes kind of deal only. There's nothing to make it sweet when it's just constant. You lose that sweetness on your tongue, you know, because we just get used to it. It's saccharine and superficial. But when you earn something, like when you really work hard for something, when you sweat and you struggle and the strife, all of that is an incredible gift, because that pleasure it can't be bought. Like, it has to be earned. And it's accessible to everyone, you know? And I think we kind of think that the work or the struggle, that means there's something wrong, but that's kind of what we've been told. And it's so completely backwards. It's actually what will make those gifts even sweeter. So that's an important thing that I try to get across, I think, in my book.
And I think you did, especially, I'm thinking of the chapter with the cow, Clementine, and how she helped you become a better milkmaid. Tell us some of those stories.
Oh, Clementine. Yeah. She was my first milk cow, and she was a challenge. She was stubborn and ornery, and every milk session with her, you know, I'd end up in tears, or it was just one thing after another, to the point that I remember I had to figure out some songs that she liked and sing them the entire time I was milking her, which was way too long because of how many times she would knock over the bucket. And I was just sure that I was the worst milkmaid ever. And I remember telling Richard, who I alluded to a few moments ago, who was my mentor, about this cow. And he just thought it was the funniest thing in the world, because he just, you know, I had a challenging milk cow. To me, I thought they were just all like that. But she taught me a lot. There was a lot in that perseverance and having to extend patience in finding the sweet little moments and interactions with her, because those were sort of my salvation. Like, maybe she would be awful and poop and pee and kick the bucket and do it again. But there would also be a moment after where I would brush her down and she'd just look at me with those big brown eyes, as if this angelic, beautiful bovine connecting with me. And I had to grab onto those things. And because they're what added even just one little moment like that would erase all of the torment of the last 45 minutes, because I could just have that connection and that sweet silence with her, and it made up for it. And so you have to start looking for those things. I think in times of struggle and strife, we have to look for those tiny little moments. whatever our hardship is. And sometimes that little moment is just being aware and noticing some of God's incredible abundant gifts to us that we can so easily overlook when we're not present. A little goldfinch that comes and lands near you, and you can just be with that little bird for a time. Or there are all these tiny little miracles that are there and given to us with such generosity, and they're just sort of waiting for us to notice them. And that's where I find such incredibly powerful and peaceful connection to the creation around us.
Is that what you mean by radiance of the ordinary?
Exactly. It's accessible to all of us, and just getting out of our heads and being present and sitting down and seeing the most mundane little thing, just being a part of a mundane little moment. For me, I find that very much in nature. I can just watch a cloud, and if you're there and you're doing it right, it might just bring you to tears because it's so profoundly beautiful, and it's being able to participate in creation in that way, understanding that we belong to it. We're a part of it too. And it's like seeing the artistry of God all around you and being vulnerable enough to let it penetrate your heart, just opening up our hearts to that. It's been just a profound way for me to find peace and a love that I can access and then further share in my daily life.
It seems so different from what we're taught growing up, like never let them see you sweat. When you talk about this openness to the radiance of the ordinary, it seems vulnerable and fragile and challenging in ways that we're not accustomed to seeking to understand.
And it is. And it's, of course, everyone uses their own judgment. I'm not going to be with some antagonistic soul and sit there bleeding out to them or anything. I mean, there's a time and a place, and, we offer. But when we're sitting with a good friend or someone that is in need or someone that's in pain, and we can allow that person if we can allow ourselves to put down our defenses and to just connect with that person on a soul level, I think we need that more than ever in our culture. I think we're all really good at living up here on the surface, and so many people feel lonely. I mean, I'm contacted all the time by my readers who just feel lonely or isolated, or, even from their own families. And I think that if maybe we could have some courage and ourselves and be able to offer to someone else what we would like offered to us, we can start developing new patterns and tapping into that current of love and belonging that is there. And sort of, you act out of that and believe that the ripples will reach where they can. Maybe it can't be measured, but it's a way that I've found to live and be in this world. After, when I was younger, I was very much like that. I was a very guarded soul. And I've found in my own life that the relationships and the quality of relationships that I've been able to make with people has just been profoundly rewarding and touching.
Let's talk a little bit about what took you from the rebellious teen years, kind of the craziness, the things you were experimenting with, I'm mad at the world kind of situation, to a homesteader. Like, how did that happen?
Well, when I was really young, we lived out in the country. And I think, I wrote about it in the book, but our house burned down and we moved to the city. And I think that ultimately, it started back. My husband and I were really into bodybuilding in our 20s and, eating the bodybuilding food, thinking we were the clean food, all that sort of stuff. And we ended up going to a presentation by Sally Fallon in this little room. And she was talking about nutrition. And I remember him and I giving each other side eye, and then I think at one part she was showing us her snack, and it was a little container with cube cheese. I remember that very clearly because I was thinking, cheese, fat. But we went to this presentation, and at the time, we were actually invited there by a farmer that we were accessing our food from. He said, this person's coming here. And so that was like really interesting because we had been getting meat from this farmer and eggs. But then at that point, we started really getting a lot more involved in getting more of our food from farms. My husband was in the military for 25 years, so we moved every couple years. And so, we started going more and more to farms directly instead of just a farm pickup. And it was through doing that I just realized that all those years, I just so badly wanted to get back to being on the land and being in the country. And so it was through a connection of food and relationships with the farmers that were growing our food and our raw milk and all these places. And having moved across Canada so much, I met a lot of different farmers, and then I started volunteering on farms. And so it was a progression from there.
And I imagine some of our listeners, like me, live in cities. Are we able to foster this connection you're talking about, not just with our farmers, but with our food and our environment when we don't live in the country?
Well, you probably can answer that better than I can, Hilda. I think, yeah, of course, for sure. And I think, even beyond the food is the relationships and the connections, which even deepen the connection to the food. And there's so many gifts in that. Yes, you get good food or you get a good side of beef, but having developed relationships with the farmers and being able to be tied in an intimate way into our food is so profoundly important. And I think that's part that's not often talked about. But I mean, some of my best friends I met through my connections with food, and they remain my best friends to this day. So I think, yes, absolutely. It just takes commitment, and in order to honor that commitment is the decision of, prioritizing what is really important to you. I don't think we can say our health is really important if we're not actually doing the things that we need to do to support our health. And that can be totally inconvenient. That may just be the way it is. If you look at convenience as going to the grocery store and getting groceries, I think that's terribly inconvenient because, I'd have to drive to the grocery store and stand in line and look for something under these blue lights. And I mean, to me, it's completely inconvenient, but it's just a shifting of the mindset. And, we lay down new patterns through new habits, and then soon it becomes just another thing we do. It just is what it is. And it's important. So we do it, and that's it.
That's so funny that your mindset of going to the grocery store is inconvenient, where most of us see it as super convenient. So, but you're right. We're slowly, choice by choice, establishing habits and patterns that move us closer to the life we want to live, I think.
Absolutely. That's all. I mean, that's what everything is, right? It's just developing new habits and patterns.
Coming up, Tara goes over how to establish healthy habits for your family and your teenagers.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Paleo Valley's Apple Cider Vinegar Complex. Get all of the healing properties of apple cider vinegar without all of the fuss and burn. Why take this complex? Apple cider vinegar has been shown repeatedly to support digestion, breaking down proteins for better absorption, and improving blood sugar response to help curb cravings. The main ingredient in apple cider vinegar is acetic acid, which supports in the extraction of nutrients from food for use by the body. And Paleo Valley, in its apple cider vinegar complex, has added additional ingredients. I'm talking herbs like turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and lemon for added benefits like improved blood sugar response, improved blood pressure, and reduced risk of heart disease. Apple cider vinegar supplementation may also be helpful with muscle cramps and satiety. So the question is not why take it, but why not take it? Head over to paleovalley.com/wise to get 15% off your first order. Again, that's paleovalley.com/wise to get 15% off your first order. And Harvest Right, a freeze dryer in every home. Sounds crazy? Maybe. But once you see what it can do, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. With a Harvest Right freeze dryer, you can preserve your favorite healthy foods, fruits, vegetables, even full meats right at home. So no more processed foods loaded with preservatives and who knows what kind of chemicals. Instead, you get fresh, wholesome meat and meals that are ready to go whenever you need them. It's fun, it's practical, and it gives you peace of mind. Soon you'll have a pantry full of healthy, long-lasting food, so you're always prepared. Learn more at harvestright.com. Again, that's harvestright.com. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. I know a lot of our listeners, like you, have children, and they're probably thinking, how do I help my kid who's feeling this tug of what's convenient and cool to go in that direction when I'm trying to get them to go more ancestral and uncool, but more natural in this direction? How do you help those kids establish the habits, Tara?
Well, I think like anything in a family, you model it. If it's a priority, you don't have a cupboard full of Lay's potato chips and Coke. It's just not there, because that's not part of the things that are important in your family. So I think you'd have a heck of a time convincing your kid of anything if you're not modeling that. And, for us, it's just the way it was. That was our family. And not only did we model it because it was important to us, but we spoke about it a lot. And, when I would go pick up milk, I would bring my kids with us. And when our raw milk farmer got arrested here in Canada, the kids came to the courthouse with me and we watched the courthouse. We watched the court proceedings. And they were just quite small at that time. So, and we would talk about it, why are we picking up milk at night in the back of a church, and we would talk about it. So, those things were just part of our family dynamic, and it was normal to them because that's what it was. And, people often will say to me, oh, but when they're teenagers and, they do their own thing. And I said, yeah, and they did. They went for sleepovers and they came home ill the next day. And I'd say, well, it's what you ate. And over time, they just start associating those things for themselves. It's not going to change what we're eating or what we're doing at home because that's what we do. That's how we eat. And so now, I have a granddaughter. My oldest daughter's 31. And she eats like we've always eaten. My daughter goes and gets raw milk because it's just part of their family dynamic. Of course, like she would know nothing else. It's the language that they're familiar with and that they speak. And that's very rewarding, to be able to see that they're now as adults eating really nourishing foods. And my granddaughter's eating nourishing foods and she didn't get vaccinated. And, it's just, it would never happen because it's not part of what they now prioritize. And I never stuck that down their throats once. We just modeled it and lived it. And that was enough. Yeah.
So side note, can you give us a little snapshot of the raw milk situation in Canada?
Oh, it's abysmal. It's really frustrating. I think the problem specifically with Canada is because we have supply management, which is very different than the US. Because we have supply management, which means that if I want to sell milk, I have to buy quota from the dairy board. And I might be wrong, but I think the milk quota per cow right now is like over $70,000. So it's just that it's a system that was started decades ago to protect farmers. But now what's happened is dairy farmers have monopolies. And because of this system, we will never have raw milk legally in Canada unless the dairy board decides they want to do that. And there's absolutely no incentive for them to do that. So anyone that has a raw milk share, they come after very aggressively. I mean, we're talking police hiding in trees and taking snapshots, and you can lose your whole livelihood, including your farm. It's terrible. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened to your farmer that was arrested and taken to court?
He had that happened to him a couple times, and they shut him down and gave him big fines. Yeah, he lost.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
there's been very little progress made in Canada. Of course, you can get raw milk, but it's people really putting themselves on the line. The buyer has no risk, but the farmer can lose everything. And they're very, very stiff with their penalties. I mean, you're better off going and selling a pound of cocaine than raw milk in this country. Literally. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's such an upside down world. Well, and since you brought up drugs, I have to mention one of the saddest chapters in your book was about your daughter's passing, and drug use was involved, right, Tara?
Yeah, marijuana. Yeah, our daughter, when she was 18, it was during COVID, or at 17, she started smoking marijuana that she bought legally from the First Nations reservation here. This was very popular with her and her classmates because there's no ID involved and there's no limits. And that was in November of 2020. And by May of 2021, she was so addicted. This is 6 months later that she couldn't sleep without it. She had a THC-induced psychosis, which is something that I had no idea about. But it's people are very defensive about marijuana, and I think they should that's fine if someone wants to smoke marijuana, whatever, but you should really look into THC-induced psychosis because it's growing rampantly with this new high THC marijuana. And also the sprays and everything else, the heavy metals that are in marijuana. And she had a psychotic break. My husband's an ER physician, and he sees this in the ER. People coming in with psychotic breaks from this THC. And she died in May. So my husband and I have really been working with our province and other parents, and I've written about this extensively, just trying to get the word out because as parents, our older kids tried pot a couple times. We really never thought anything about it, but we were completely ignorant to what can happen to a young brain with this high THC pot. It's and of course, I know the Weston A. Price Journal also covered her story. I don't remember what season when that was last year sometime. So her story was also in there.
Yes, we'll put a link to that in the episode description. It's so tragic, and it's really important for people to be aware of the dangers associated, like you said, with this high THC content. Today's marijuana is not the same as yesterday's marijuana.
Oh, not at all. And in fact, the marijuana that was left in her car, we had tested by a third-party governmental lab, and it was, full of toxins, pesticides, heavy metals. And so, this is another layer of concern that has to be looked at. But this idea, like in Canada, marijuana is legalized. And I know in the States, some states are doing it, some aren't. But I think that as this is pressed forward, this big marijuana, there's a lot of pharmaceutical investment in this. There's a lot of nefarious investment in marijuana legalization. It's really interesting when you start digging into it. And you really have to wonder who stands to benefit. And it's not young minds because the rates of psychosis are going through the roof. There's whole organizations of parents whose children have died after having psychotic breaks from marijuana. And, it's not one or two parents. There's tens of thousands of stories, and it's just growing astronomically. So this idea that legalizing this stuff is going to somehow bring forward some new progressive utopia is just completely off the mark. And it's going to be a devastating effect on our children.
Right. And it is obviously today and yesterday. And I'm so sorry for the loss of your daughter. And I have to ask you, even though it's super sensitive, how is this the radiance of the ordinary, Tara? How is there anything beautiful that can come from such a tragic moment in her life and in your life?
Well, I mean, I don't want to make it seem as if, our daughter dying has brought forward some profound, gift. It's not that simple. It's absolutely the most heinous, tragic. I mean, I honestly didn't think I was going to live after our daughter died, Hilda. It's that kind of pain as a mother that, you're so certain. I wrote about this too, that you have this deal with God, like I will never lose one of my children because surely God knows I am not capable of surviving that. And I thought I had that deal with God, and everyone else, it happens to other people, but it doesn't happen to you. And it was just through that pain and that profound grief and living it every day and not running away from it, and just allowing it and surrendering to it. For the first year, I think I was in shock for a year, to be honest. I mean, my husband and I would just sit together and I would read books to us, books about grief, and we would cry and we would lie in bed. We just did whatever we had to do, but there was just little specks. I think that speaks to what I spoke of earlier, just that being in that treacherous place and how desperate you are to just a little sip of air, just a little gulp of relief. And for a split second, my husband and I having coffee in the morning and everything is desolate around us and heavy, and a little hummingbird comes and takes a sip out of the hollyhock in front of us. And it's just a fleeting second. But for that fleeting second, because you're there and you're aware, you can let go only a second. The grief would be gone for a second and then it would come rushing back in. Like, don't you forget about this heaviness. And it would be like that continuously, but by being there and being in it and not taking drugs or wine or whatever it was to try and divert ourselves. Yes, it was very excruciating, but also when those little things would happen, those little gifts, the dragonflies, or just, even just a beautiful sunset, they felt so sweet because there was such relief in them, just to be free of that heaviness for a few moments. And it was such a gift. And over time, and it is over quite a length of time, you start being able to be in that beautiful moment, that peaceful moment a little bit more. And I think maybe that's where I even am today. I mean, I will always, always be mourning my daughter. I will miss her for the rest of my life. There is no coming away from that. There's no magical healing moment. I think that's kind of a false story we tell ourselves. But I do have those moments, and there's many, many moments in my day, many moments. And through those beautiful, peaceful moments, I'm connecting with her in a really profound, alive way. Just last week, a blue heron literally flew about 8 feet in front of me, and I could just even see its feathers. And it's to be able to be wholly open to that and have that sort of rush of beauty and connection, crash up into you, and that you can be a part of that is just really, it's where I find my belonging and my purpose in this world. And it's where I find my daughter and my connection to her as well.
I wonder if we were talking earlier about having kind of our guards up and kind of hearts encased in steel because our lives can be so rough. I wonder if by letting our guards down and unflinchingly looking at the ordinary, even when it is death, even when it is painful, that makes us more alive, which I feel like in essence is the thread throughout your whole book, right? There is a radiance there if we dare to engage with it.
Yeah. And we're capable of it too. I think that's the saddest thing about our culture, is that we're all convinced we're not capable of that hard stuff, or we're so death phobic. And it keeps us living these lives as with such disregard for the preciousness of our lives. And it's been in keeping death close to me and remembering my mortality. There's nothing, it's not a dark feeling. It's actually been an incredible blessing in our lives, is just to have that awareness of how fleeting and precious our lives are. Because you can't sit there for 3 hours doom scrolling if you have this awareness of how precious this very moment is. It makes you live with a consideration towards, what's important and what you can really, what's really not worth our angst or our time. And so you can get really clear about that. And in so doing that, you just build a life that is so much richer than if you just act as if, this thing goes on forever. I'm going to go home at 4 and have my food, and I'm going to go sit in front of the TV, and I'm going to wake up in the morning and do the thing. No, like, we're here with our own talents and things, gifts that we're supposed to be offering and sharing with the world. And it's running, the time is ticking, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, wonderful gift that time is ticking, and we should act as if we understand that. And so that's really what
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand that some saints of old would purposely imagine their death every day because it kept their mortality at the forefront, making them realize the preciousness of every moment. Like you said, it was a healing thing to do, not a thing to be afraid of. It's like, let me embrace that truth. And like we said earlier, look at it unflinchingly and see if I can't live even more in the moment, more aware of these radiant moments.
Yeah, I love that. And I probably do that every day. I do keep death really at the forefront, but it's not an obsession. It's not like I walk around thinking, I'm going to die, really, like, but let's all stop being so darn serious, let's just have some fun sometimes. And all these big worries and big concerns are nothing. No one's going to remember them in 15 years, So we might as well do some good while we're here and appreciate this life and, surrender to the stuff we can't control and the stuff that we have some say in. We should be in there with our whole hearts.
That's beautiful. And you may have already answered this question in our conversation, Tara, but I want to pose to you the question I love to pose at the end of the show. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, I probably answered the same thing because I've been nittering on about it for 20 years or so, 30 years maybe. But honestly, it is our food and our relationships around our food. Because if your body isn't sound, your mind isn't sound, your emotions aren't sound, and all of that, it comes back to food. It's not all that it is, but it's the foundational thing that it is. And you have to be well nourished to experience this life in the abundance that it's given to us. You can't just change your mindset if your mind is being fueled by things that are, that are poison or that just are undernourishing you. You have to be well nourished to show up in this world in the way that we were meant to show up in the world. So farmers, local farmers, and developing relationships with them and connecting to them in the land as much as you can. It's just mandatory. It's mandatory.
I love it. Tara, thank you so much for showing up the way you're showing up. On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thank you for this conversation today.
It was always lovely to see your shining face, Hilda.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Hilda.
Our guest today was Tara Couture. Visit her website, slowdownfarmstead.com, to learn more. And I am Hilda Labrada-Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for today's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now a simple little reminder to simply follow this podcast on the platform of your choice. Or better yet, download our podcast app. Yes, there's a Wise Traditions podcast app which you can get on Android or Apple devices. So that way you won't miss an episode. And please, please, please continue to share your favorite episodes with your friends. We recently passed 16 million downloads, so we want to keep growing, spreading the word about wise traditions, not just the podcast, but the traditions themselves. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.